So an object has 6,500 joules of kinetic energy and a mass of 25 kilograms. What's the object's speed? So we're going to just identify what we got. We've got, this is going to be the 65,000 joules of kinetic energy. So this is going to be our KE. This is, of course, our mass. And we want to know the object's speed, which is velocity. All right, now I'm going to write everything down because it's very helpful to write everything down. And I'm going to start with the kinetic energy equation. So kinetic energy is just 1/2 times mass times velocity squared. And so we know the 65,000 joules of kinetic energy, we know the mass, and we just are trying to find the velocity. So now we could rearrange this first, but you know what? I'm just going to plug the numbers in and then solve for the unknown variable. So the kinetic energy is 65,000 joules. And we do 1/2 times the mass, and the mass is 25 kilograms. And we want to find the velocity, but we don't know it. So that is velocity squared. So then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simplify this a little bit. So 65,000 joules is equal to 1/2 times 25 is going to give me 12.5 kilograms. And I'm going to take that times velocity squared. Now I want to get velocity by itself. And so since this is being multiplied, okay, multiplied, that means I have to divide it. So I'm going to divide 12.5 kilograms. That's going to cancel this out over here. That's going to make sure that velocity is by itself. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So 12.5 kilograms. And so what that's going to give me, if I take 65,000 or 6,500 divided by 12.5, 12.5, then that gives me, just double check that, 65,000 divided by 12.5. So I get 520. So 520, and the units are just going to be that, and that's fine. Velocity squared. Now, I don't want velocity squared. I just want velocity. And so how do you undo a square? Well, you take the square root of it, and that's going to give me velocity. But whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. And so when I take the square root of 520, so the square root of 520, I get 22.8. 22.8 meters per second. Okay, so I'm going to put a box around that because that's my final answer. And there we go. Okay, so as you can see, you just take the square root. For my next part, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. I have an object ahead. Let's just undo that. So I have an object with 7,500 joules of also kinetic energy. And this one has a speed. So let me just mark this down. This is my kinetic energy. This is a brand new problem. And it has a speed, a velocity of 17 meters per second. It wants to know the object's mass, which is m. I'm going to use the same equation as before. Kinetic energy is 1/2 mv squared. Okay, this one's a little bit easier than the one previous because I don't have to worry about square rooting it. But once again, kinetic energy is 7,500 joules. That's going to be equal to 1/2 of mass, which I don't know, times the velocity squared. So 17 meters per second squared. Okay. Now I'm going to simplify this, and I'm going to there's nothing I could really do on the left-hand side. So 75,000 joules. Now I can't multiply this mass. I don't know the m. All right. But what I can do is I can do the 17 meters per second. This is meters per second. I could square that and then multiply it by half. So 17 squared gives me 289. So I could do 1/2 of 289, and units are meters squared, seconds squared, times m. So I just squared this. Now I'm going to take half of that. So 7,500 joules is, so times 0.5 or times a half, or just divided by 2. And I get 144.5. 144.5 meters squared, seconds squared, and all that times mass. But I want to get mass by itself. And so since I'm multiplying, I have to divide by 144.5 meters squared, seconds squared. Okay, and that'll cancel that out. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So 144.5 meters squared, seconds squared. So 7,500 divided by 144.5. And it turns out that that is 51.9. 51.9, and the units are going to cancel out to be just kilograms in the end if we unpack it. Don't worry about necessarily how we got that, but it does. And so mass is 51.9 kilograms.